Hello and welcome to the Bold Black Girls podcast. I'm Aries.
And I am Kim.
Hey, girl.
Hey, girl. Hey, what's going on?
Oh, living the good life over here.
Living that good quarantine life.
Right. We broke quarantine for a little bit yesterday.
Yeah, we did. We ended up bumping into each other at one of our favorite breakfast spots. Well, mine. I don't know if it's your favorite, but
I love that oatmeal.
that's how you know. That's how you know you old. Life after 35, you're like, girl, I want to go get that good oatmeal. Like,
got good oatmeal over there.
yeah,
That sounds like an old lady statement too.
girl, you know I love Raisin Bran. Is it on sale?
They got it on sale for $3.99 over at Kroger. That's how my grandma used to talk to her friends.
And then we ran into Cheryl.
Cheryl.
Yeah, so
it was like a little cool party
reunion, right? And it was so unplanned.
Right. What had happened was I was there sitting on the patio with one of my other friends. Mm-hmm. And then I sent you a picture of the oatmeal. Like, hey, look what I'm eating.
Right.
And then you was like, hey, I'm on my way over there anyways. I had finished your workout, of course.
Yes.
And then while I was
workout.
While I'm going to the car to get some Lysol to wipe your table down, here comes Cheryl. We like, hey, girl, come over here.
Well, no, she came over there. She started waving at me. I was like, I don't know this lady with
I
this
saw
mask
her from
on.
the side. I was actually calling her name while she was trying to call your name. And then that's when you was like, who is that? Being all paranoid as you normally are. Who's that? Who's that calling my name?
You gotta be careful in these corona. You gotta be careful in these corona COVID streets.
Right, exactly. So
because people are not keeping their 6 foot distance
at all.
And I'm concerned.
It's crazy. Like I was happy that when we were sitting out there, people had their mask on. They were, going into the store, because it's like a store / I don't even know want to call it a restaurant.
Cafe.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, people got their mask on and stuff. But other places, you just see folks I'm like, this is interesting.
Serious.
It's an interesting, what do you call it? Like a case study.
It is. And I haven't been down to Dallas County. I'm staying out of the city of Dallas. So I don't know if they're enforcing with their masks. But I know that me personally, I'm wearing my mask. If I go into a restaurant, to do a pickup order.
Right.
I'm limiting eating out.
That was my first time eating out. Wow. Like out and like sitting somewhere. I mean, it was out on the patio. We were by ourselves, but still, I hadn't sat anywhere.
And that's probably going to be our new normal for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I am personally going to stores at like 6 o'clock in the morning when they first open. So that morning I was at Lowe's. And there was probably about 3 customers in the entire store.
Yeah, I do pickup orders typically. Like I just pick up my groceries or have it delivered by Amazon Fresh.
Okay.
No sponsorship, but you can sponsor us if you're listening. Yeah, so that's kind of what I do just because I don't want to go in the store. So if I don't have to go in, I won't.
Yeah.
Unless it's Sprouts.
That's my store.
I'm doing like Pastor, what's his name we said from Chicago?
Pastor Sharp.
Pastor Sharp says, the church, we've been open, but the building is closed. And he said the Holy Ghost had to wake him up out his sleep before he opened that church.
Pour water on him.
I wasn't mad at him though. He had great points because he's like, we'll open up when they open the governor's office in the White House for tours again.
He said, and when their places are open and they know who there is.
Exactly. I'm like, I'm with you on that. Speaking of the political folks, let's talk about Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, actually, so Sharp was talking to Angela Rye, but then you sent me a video with Amanda Seals and Angela Rye where they were going in about what was said about Joe Biden on Breakfast Club. So
yeah, if you haven't seen the video, folks, it's an 18-minute video of Joe Biden speaking to Charlamagne the God on the Breakfast Club. And if you haven't seen it, you probably heard of it because everybody been talking about it. And he basically ended, first of all, I'm going to get to that in a second. He basically ended the statement saying something like, if you still have, and you have to watch the whole thing to kind of, put everything in context, obviously. But he was like, if you still trying to figure out whether you're going for me or Trump, then you ain't black. That's exactly what he said, which is hilarious because the whole episode, episode, he was like, come on, man. The way he was talking to Charlamagne, I was like, you don't talk to anybody else like this. This is hilarious. Code switching at its finest in the reverse.
Yep.
Which I laughed at him and Trump, to be honest with you, because they're both like old dudes that I feel like they both are not cognitively where they need to be.
Emotionally competent and maybe not even emotionally intelligent.
They are old and
set in their own ways.
And not even I just think that the cognitive abilities are not where they're not sharp in the brain. So they just be saying stuff. I know both of their teams be like, Lord, please make them stop talking. Like, please stop talking. Like, neither one of them can talk for an extended period of time. When I say extended, I mean like 15 seconds or more.
Well, most people, when they become of age, they don't even care what they say, right? So we know our mothers, they say whatever, however they feel.
Right.
And I think it's an age thing too.
Yeah, and they're both old from the time when I typically think that they all look at Black people a certain way. If you listen when they talk about like Black issues, it's almost as if they think that every Black person is poor and in jail on welfare or some kind of social services, type of thing. And it's like, that's not our issues. That's not all our issues. Yes,
everyone's issues.
We're underrepresented. We're not getting, we don't have the political power, the economic, resources and the access to healthcare and all that stuff. But that's from racism. That's not because we are all drug dealers or on welfare on purpose. Like, that's not how this is. But I just want to make sure that on our platform, we're clear as to what this even means. Because I feel like we'll jump on some stuff like that and be like, he said you ain't Black. I ain't voting. I ain't voting for him. I ain't voting at all. And we can't do that. We cannot afford to not exercise our vote. But what we can do, because of how I look at it, is that, Black women have been the powerhouse, basically the power base behind the Democratic Party for years. We were in droves. 95% of us were voted for or more. I can't remember the exact number. It was probably 98 or something in there for Hillary Clinton last time. We can't say the same thing for, other folks. And so we've done our job and we revived Joe Biden's political career during the primaries. We've done so much just in general for the Democratic Party. I think that we need to step out of the mindset of like, I don't call myself a Democrat. I don't call myself a Republican. I don't call myself anything. I feel like I vote on what issues are going
what matters.
What matters to me. Yeah. And it's now our turn to collect on our hard work that we have been putting in for this party. And I think they owe it to us. I really do believe that we deserve it. They owe it to us to give us a Supreme Court seat. They owe it to us to give us a Black woman VP. We have too many women that have overqualified for that role that have not even been considered. I think that there's just a lot of stuff that we need to do. Just like when you're going for a job and you're negotiating. Yeah, I want the job, but before I sign this offer,
the benefits,
we're going to go through a negotiation process. We're going to talk about the benefits. We're going to talk about all these, and then we're going to shake hands when it's all over, and we're going to work together fine. And that's what we're planning to do to get Trump out of there. This is definitely not a political podcast, but at the same time, politics is how this country has used its power to negatively affect Black people.
So. Absolutely. And we have to be educated, right? Exactly. And we must get out there, not only educate, but engage.
Right.
Engage. I mean, if I feel like, and I know we've probably said this, if we can go stand in line for shoes, we can go stand in line to vote.
Girl, don't even get started on that.
So we have to do our part as well and be accountable for ourselves. And we can't complain if we're not out there as well, kind of, making sure that we're engaged.
Because it's the same people that'll be like, I'm not voting at all, and then be complaining when all these laws and things that are happening, they're happening in the political realm. You have to participate.
Exactly, where there's a law that's going to eliminate a service or a benefit that then directly impacts you.
Exactly. So no, you don't have to be a political scientist, although I did get my bachelor's in political science. You don't have to be a political scientist, but like you do need to be aware, because there's things where, for instance, I don't need to know everything, but there are certain people that I trust that they've done the education on, in my Kanye voice. They've done the education on, these things, and I trust what they're, that they've done that work on our behalf. So that's why you usually vote in these representatives to come in to represent you, because of what they are going to do for you, right? That's what this is all about. It's all these rich folks who fund political campaigns. They're getting something for that. They're not just being like, here, let me give you $100,000. They're like, okay, so when you get in, I'm gonna need
what I need
this
you to do.
and that. So when we do it, everybody gets all nervous, like, y'all gonna make people not vote, and they're not gonna. No. If you're a part of this process, you still need to know that we got to vote for someone. We have to choose even if it's the worst of two evils. I didn't necessarily want to vote for Hillary. I voted for her though, because I didn't want him. And if you don't vote for the party that, that is
the opposite party that you don't want in,
you're helping the other person
by not voting,
because they're powering their base. This fool put a whole t-shirt. He put a whole bunch of products on his page after Joe Biden made that comment that said, you ain't black. And he got black people modeling the t-shirts that say, you ain't black, hashtag you ain't black, and all this stuff, Joe Biden, like, so that people won't forget that he said that. Like, he's using that to fuel other folks to, so it's like, we got to be smart. Yeah, be smart. Don't fall into it because you just want to be like, well,
because of a hashtag. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, yeah, we know he shouldn't have said it. It was not cool. That's why right away he came back like, I didn't mean to say that and all this junk. But that's beside the point. We're trying to get to a goal. And this is kind of goes into that thing of where, remember I told you about how I see how certain people work together for a common goal, even though they may not like each other.
Yes.
I feel like that's something that we got to work on as a people, because we'll be like, I don't like her. I don't like her.
I'm not working with her.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you missing out on some money or some code, some something that
This is a personal.
Exactly. And so it's like, no, neither one of them are necessarily going to represent everything that we need right now. But let's make some headway by showing people right now. What we're showing is that we have a voice and we have power, because we wouldn't even be having this conversation. He would have never got on the Breakfast Club if we hadn't been having these conversations ahead of time. And Agreed. Angela Rye and all those ladies writing their op-ed in Washington Post on, and go read that, because it talks about some of the things that people are asking for as, kind of an endorsement, saying, hey, we want.
And if you don't want to read, she has a very good podcast.
Mm-hmm. I will check it out. So, anyway, so that was on my heart, because I'm like, this was just too much. And then you just see the comments and you got people like, see, that's why I'm not voting. I'm like, what? Get in here. You got to vote. Sorry. You don't have choices right now.
Right.
That's not the choice. The choice is not to go vote for Trump. And I don't think that anybody who brought up this topic of asking for things none of them are saying go vote for Trump or whatever.
Exactly.
But while we're on our way to that poll, I'm going to need you to do some things before we get there.
Yes.
So that's kind of where we're at with that. But yeah, and speaking of that, some things that we need to do. Today's episode is pretty cool. It's gonna be
looking
good.
Forward to it. Yes.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
We have a special guest.
We have a special guest, and she is my best friend of almost 20 years now.
Wow.
I think you're 19 maybe right now, but I met her. I was 21 years old. And
I'm telling your age now. They're over there calculating.
I know. Hey, I'm not showing my age.
You don't look it.
Thank you, girl. But yeah, I'm like, so me and her have been friends for 20 years. We met at church.
Well, praise the Lord.
So we've been, hallelujah. We've been through a lot together over the years. It's funny because I've been living in Texas for 14 years, and we've been really having like a phone call, FaceTime friendship, for all these years. And obviously going back I go home, I see her, stuff like that. But it's not been based
Yes.
on us like hanging out and all that kind of stuff all the time. We just our support system. So she has a very amazing story. Today we're going to focus on what her job is, her career,
her specialty, right?
Her specialty, which is estate planning, will and trusts and probates and all that kind of stuff. And that's an area that until she got into that, I didn't know a lot about at all. Mm-hmm. And she has helped me see the value of this is how people create generational wealth for their families. Because when you don't set that up ahead of time, it's just like we'll go get life insurance, And you're like, okay, life insurance, that's fine.
I'm good.
But you don't tell the money where to go when like the part of your estate planning is to tell your money where you want it to be applied. When, you don't want it to just get split up and everybody all over the place getting your money and all that. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So I'm looking forward to having her on the show. She is super knowledgeable. I mean, I've just watched her grow through this process. So I think it's going to be very educational and very helpful. Yes. And Kim is going to get her trust done by the time.
Yes, I am. So, and you're right. So it goes back to like iron sharpens iron, right? Mm-hmm. Having people around you that can motivate, inspire you, challenge you, and you don't feel like you're competing with each other, but you are truly like helping, like, hey girl, do you have this in place? And you also, this is also vulnerable, right? Because as a Black community, we don't talk about our salaries. We don't talk about things that really are important that will educate and help the next generation. Yeah. And so it speaks a lot that you all have been friends this long, because you've been in Texas, 12 years?
14 years.
Oh my gosh. So to sustain pretty much like a virtual, you're not physically seeing her, right? Other than like FaceTime. So that speaks volumes.
It goes back to that book we read. We read last month, Relational Intelligence and Nurturing Relationships and Growing in the Relationship and Moving. We've had our ups and downs over the years where we fell off, we got back, we did, went through the growth spurts together and learned how to adjust to, oh, this works better for us. This doesn't work. I need to mature here. I need to, all that is a part of just like growing in those relationships, and then sharing and exposing each other. Like she exposed me, I expose you. We're like talking about this stuff, and hopefully people who are listening will also say, hey, I didn't realize that I need to do this. This is important. And I know that I want my kids, I don't want them starting from zero if something happened to me. Exactly. I want them
stressing during grief. And I think this was the perfect time. And so while we're in this pandemic, what better time than to prepare? So the title of our podcast today is Preparation in a Pandemic. Exactly. And so we know that COVID-19 is impacting the Black community or the community of color. And so with that said, I mean, majority of the deaths are us, right? Exactly. So the people who are dying, do they have anything in place for their family? Because just think, if I pass away from COVID-19, like you are traumatized just from that. And then to add on to more trauma for this.
Yeah, and we don't want that. We want to we just got through doing an episode on mental health. Yes. So we're trying to hit some of those topics that we feel like are really affecting us right now, and things that we can take action on right now. So that's why this topic is super important to me and you. And we always wanted this podcast to be something that people can, that's why we have the call to actions and all that stuff at the end, is like so that you can actually listen to this and do something. Yep. Right afterwards. Like you can do this, and it'll be something that'll help you in some type of way, in your day-to-day life. So with that being said, we will go ahead and welcome Lauren Peebles. Yay. Hello, we have Lauren Peebles with us, my BFF. Hey.
Welcome, Lauren.
Hello, thanks for having me.
We're so glad to have you here. We were setting up our little timeline of all the things we felt like people could benefit from right now, especially with everything going on, and things to start considering in our life. Generational wealth is something that as Black people, we want to, we always hear that about like, we need to start doing generational wealth, but there's ways that takes place in families, and ways that it kind of can set you back as a family too, if you don't have your stuff together. So first things first, you're a lawyer. How did you decide that this was going to be the area of focus for you?
Okay, so again, thank you for having me. So first things first, I am an attorney licensed to practice in the state of California. So much of what I will talk about today is going to be California law, although a lot of it is very similar in other states or other jurisdictions. So it can still benefit your audience if they're not in California, but I have to state that disclaimer.
Right.
So how I actually first became an attorney, I had always been like, not nerdy, okay? I'm not a nerd, but I had always been like the friend that would read the warranties, like read all the paperwork when you buy a new vacuum cleaner. Like that was interesting to me when I was in college. I remember I had 2 college roommates and I would be like, okay, we need a contract. Who's paying the water bill? Who's paying this? Like we need to find this stuff. So that was always in me. And then I ended up working for a law firm after I graduated from college. And then that kind of being introduced to law and working around other attorneys and realizing how, like, not easy, but I understood what was going on. So from there, I went to law school. And that was kind of the start. Really, I believe that it was God that just kind of like moved me in a position to actually be an attorney. Because after I got out of college, I was like, I'm never going back to school again. But then God said something different. So that's how I actually became an attorney. And then how I got in this specific area, I was actually working for another firm and we did asbestos litigation. So it was, you guys have probably heard those commercials that come on late at night. Like, if you think you have mesothelioma, like that's what I was doing originally. But at the same time, my grandmother was aging, obviously, as we all are. She was aging. She had already had a trust, but she wanted to make some changes to the trust. And then, and she did. So I introduced her to an attorney who did this type of law. She made some changes to her trust and she passed in 2012. And so one of the changes that she had made right before she passed was to name me as her successor trustee. So if you have a trust, and we'll talk about what a trust is, but if you have a trust, you have to appoint someone who is like the person who carries out the instructions that the trust defines. So the trust is going to say, give everything to my son, but there has to be a person who's going to carry that out or administer the trust. So she named me as that person. And when she passed in 2012, I stepped into the role. So I started going to the banks, closing out her accounts, working with my family, scheduling like family meetings, like what we gonna do about this and about that.
Right.
And from there, I was really good at it and I had a heart for it. And I was like, okay, I'm good at this. I'm honest. I'm trustworthy. I'm not like power hungry. Like I just felt like I was really good at what I was doing for my family. So I thought I should do this for other Black families. Like they need me, they may not have a lawyer in their family. Like I can be that person. And so in my mind, I was thinking I was going to still do the asbestos litigation, but I was going to just do this on the side for families. So I started doing it on the side. And then one thing led to another. I mean, I don't know how long you guys want me to talk about it. Like one thing led to another, and like one client turned into 2 clients, turned into 3 clients. And then after a while, I was able to get a little choosy. I was like, okay, I don't even really like this part of the job. I started drafting trusts. I was reading trusts for families because they would come to me to carry out the instructions. And I was like, why did the lawyer draft this way? Like, this is so complicated. So I started having my own ideas about how I would draft a person's trust to be a good fit for that specific family. And then once I started doing the drafting, I kind of stopped doing the administration. And then one of my earlier clients, she passed away before we got a chance to finalize her documents. And so then she was my first probate case. So then that kind of led into probate. So one thing always like built upon something else, like little small steps led to this.
Were you noticing? Well, I was about to go into a whole nother thing, but okay. Go ahead, Kim. You go.
You really do have a story, Lauren, and I mean, it's just so interesting. And Aries has shared so much about you. So when she told me about the estate planning, she was like, Kim, there is a difference between a will and a trust. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know that. So could you kind of go into like, what is estate planning, and then what's the difference between will and trust?
Sure. So I'll answer your question in the reverse. I'll talk about the difference between a will and a trust first, because that really is a common misconception. So don't feel bad if you didn't know the difference, because most people don't. Most people are familiar with a will. Whenever they get ready to think about what they have and they're like, you know, I'm thinking about the future, I know I'm not going to be around forever, the first thing they say is, oh, I got to do a will. But they don't know that there are other tools out there that may be more beneficial. So one of the main differences between a will and a trust is that a will only takes effect once you die. You have to be dead for the will to be relevant. Once you pass away, the will is going to say who gets your property, or who's going to be the guardian of your minor children if you have minor children. On the other hand, with a trust can actually step in, or you can actually start carrying out the terms of a trust while you're still living. So imagine if you get dementia, you get Alzheimer's, you get some type of accident, and like your cognitive ability is now brought into question. You don't know who you are, you don't know what day it is, or your memory is questionable. If you ever get to the point where you can't handle your own affairs, your trust, or the person who you name as a trustee, can then be empowered to step in and say, you're still alive, but you can't handle this right now. Let me step in and pay your bills, file your taxes, you know, cash your checks, things of that nature, which you don't have that benefit with a will, because you got to be dead with a will. And I'm sure it's the same in Texas and many other states, but here in California, if you have a certain amount of property and you only have a will, you have to go through the court proceeding that's called probate. You have to go to court to transfer those assets to whomever is the person that's going to inherit them. And that's one of the main reasons why people like to do a trust, because they don't want to go through probate. Most of the time, people have had a very negative experience with probate because it's expensive. It takes a long time. And so with a trust, as soon as the person dies, the trustee is literally empowered from that very moment to step in, or if they have lost capacity. So the trust will say, if I don't know who I am, Aries gets to step in and carry things out for me. Or if I die, Aries gets to step in and carry things out or pay my bills. She doesn't have to go to court to get an order from a judge to empower her to do that. All she has to do is take my documents to the bank, show them that she is who she says she is, and that's it. That's not the case with probate. With probate, it's a lot more involved. And you know, it's been interesting seeing how probate court has shaken out with this whole COVID and coronavirus, because for a long time here in California, our courts were closed. So I was getting clients who had a deceased loved one, and they had business that they had to conduct for the person who died. They either had to, you know, sell the home or get money out of the bank account to handle their final burial expenses. And they couldn't do that because we couldn't get any order from a court. All the courts were closed, and there's really nothing you could do. Now, if those same families had trusts, they would not have had to wait.
Right. See, that's the part, and we're gonna get into it, but I'm just, Lauren will tell you that we're going through that right now with my uncle. He passed away. It'll be almost to the day next week, 12 months ago, and we're just now finalizing the probate. because he did not have a trust. And it's been a long, tedious journey trying to get through, all that paperwork. And I was thinking about how my dad, who really is the person who's been handling the business, but he's older. He don't want to, it's difficult for him to go through all that stuff. So if he didn't have me, like how much more work it would have taken for him to just have to go. It's just too much. Like
and your dad is good because at least he could send an email.
Right.
At the very least, he could send an email. But some people can't even send an email. And when you think about it from a practical perspective, so somebody passes away. First things first, you gotta bury them. We gotta buy the casket or cremate them, have the funeral services. So if that person didn't have any money or didn't have enough money, then the family is chipping in to pay those expenses. So, okay, you just asked Uncle so-and-so for $500 to put in the casket. Now, the person who died had a house somewhere that gets to transfer to the family, which is fantastic. But in order to get to that point through probate, you've got to get an order from the court. To get the order from the court, you have to file a petition. Here in California, that's another $465. So that money starts to add up. And, a lot of people, they'll have a house, but they don't have very much else. It's like house rich and cash poor kind of a thing. So it becomes very taxing on the family. Because now who's going to pay for this? Who is going to, you're going to get something in the end. You'll get a portion of the house or you'll get those proceeds in the end. But getting to that point, you got to come out of pocket. Somebody's got to pay that. Versus if you had a trust, you some of those expenses you can avoid. So it makes it easier. So when you think about the difference between a will and a trust, with establishing a trust up front is more costly. It costs more money to do that than to do a will, because a will is super easy to do. But you are saving so much money from later down the probate and time and hassle. So you really gotta, be more, more thinking about like the experience that you want to leave behind. Like you're leaving this property, your money, your house, your car to your loved ones. You don't want them to be burdened and get it. You want it to actually be a gift. You want them to think of your legacy fondly, and you don't want them to have this negative idea about like, oh yeah, I got, $20,000 from my brother's house, but I had to spend a year going back and forth and doing those things. And, I compare a lot of my clients' situation to my grandmother, who was like, perfect example of estate planning. And Kim, I'll make sure that I answer what estate planning is. But for my grandmother, so she had the trust, she had everything set up. When she passed away, I didn't have to go to court. I literally went straight to the bank, showed them the trust, was able to close out her accounts and move that into a trust account. And now, we rented out her home. We get income every month from her property. It's just been very seamless. And so every month when I get my deposit from our tenants, I'm thinking of the legacy that my grandmother left behind and how positive it is. Like, it's just been such a blessing to get this, and she passed away in 2012. So 8 years later,
you're still reaping the benefits of
getting money from my grandmother. And her sons, her children are still able to benefit from it. It's like a monthly allowance, and that's because she had her business taken care of. So what is an estate plan? First of all, everybody has an estate. One of the things that I hear often is people are like, well, I don't have that much. They think that they've got to be rich, because estate sounds like, all jazzy.
Exactly. Estate sale. We're having an estate sale.
Sounds jazzy.
It's not that. An estate simply means the property that you own. So we all have it. And even if you don't own a house or have a whole lot of money in the bank, we've got iPhones and MacBooks and all, Louis Vuitton bags. That stuff has value. And if anybody has some Louis Vuitton bags out there and you don't know what to do with them, you send them to California. So everybody has stuff that you cannot take with you when you die. So your estate plan is the plan for transferring that property, whatever you owned at your death, to whomever is supposed to get it. Now, you can decide who you want to get it, or you could do nothing and let the state laws dictate who is important to you, because the state will give you an estate plan if you don't have one for yourself. They will say, based on, you know, what legislatures think, they think that your children are important to you, and that if something happened to you, you probably wanted to go to your kids. But the way that the laws break down about who gets a portion of your property is very complicated and very beyond the scope of today. But suffice it to say that, let's say you're married, but you don't want to give your stuff to your spouse. Maybe you wanted to go to your children, or you wanted to go to your parent, or a charity, whatever the case may be. You have to define that for yourself. I always think about, what movie is that? It's where he's like, because if you don't define for yourself,
that's on The Best Man, when she was
if you don't define for yourself, you'll be eaten alive or something like that. Think of that with your estate plan. Like, you have to define who you want to get your stuff. So that is very clear, because I've had a number of cases where you'll be surprised at the relationships. Kids are coming out of the woodwork. So you want to clarify, these are my children.
Papa might have been a Rolling Stone. You don't know. He got kids in another state somewhere.
That's true. That's when they start appearing.
And that's so funny, because, you know, I've learned so much that I've taken from my practice, I've applied to my personal life, which is mainly that people be having secrets, and I don't put anything past any person. I've had a number of clients that are like, oh no, he didn't even know that person. He would have never done X, Y, and Z. And yeah, he did that and some more stuff. But he could have defined who he wanted to get his thing. He could have clarified this. Another area where people fight a lot over is who's going to be in charge. The oldest child feels like they're entitled because they're the oldest. The youngest feels like they're entitled because they were the ones that took care of mom right before she died. So all of these things can be resolved easily if you just simply say what the situation is. It's really hard to be mad at a dead person. It's a lot easier to be mad at somebody that's alive. So if the the person who passed away defines this is what it is, and you don't like it, who are you gonna be mad at? It's your dead mama that said it.
Exactly.
Like, you want it to be very clear. So with an estate plan, you are looking at all the different property that you have, and you are figuring out what is going to be the tool to transfer this particular asset to the person who I intend to get it. And who is the person that I intend to get it? The easiest thing is obviously kids. Everybody gives everything to their kids. But some things to consider is like if you're taking care of elderly parents, if anybody else is dependent on you, are there charities that you support? Like things like that is what are your values? What is important to you, and how do you want your stuff to be shared?
Let's use Kim as an example, because
I was just going to say, use me as an example.
Because she has her mom living with her, and she has a daughter that's, how old is Kira? 20?
20. In
college, you know, so if something were to happen to Kim today, like before that would happen, what would be the best method for her to, like, she has a home,
putting all my little assets out here. I don't have much, y'all, that's listening on the podcast, so don't get it twisted.
So we start by talking about, like, what is it that you have? What is it that you have, and how do you want it to go? So obviously you have your home. You may have a job. You may have life insurance. You may have a car. Like, we'll itemize and look at all of that property, and then we'll say, okay, now what should happen to this? So I heard you say you have a daughter that's in college. So it is possible that you may need to use the money that is from your home to finish out paying her tuition. Maybe her tuition will be done at that point. And then you can say, well, I want, half of what I have to go to my mom because she's still dependent on me and she's going to need some help getting a new place. So we kind of like have this discussion about your family and what that looks like, who's relying on you more than anything. And then how is all of this going to split up? And some of it is, your estate or the property that you own at your death may not be enough to take care of everybody. And you shouldn't feel any obligation for it to take care of everybody. It's a gift. It's an inheritance. So you're raising your daughter right now to be self-sufficient. Anything you leave to her is icing on the cake.
I'm not obligated.
You are not obligated. And I tell that to my clients a lot, especially my older clients, because they'll spend so much time thinking about how they're going to leave their property to the people that come after them, that they're not even thinking about this got to take care of you in your latter years.
Right.
If you have to go to a nursing home, who's going to pay for that? Like, we got to think about all of those competing interests.
In our family, you know, in the Black family, that we like, well, I'm going to stay in this house. Y'all going to take care of me up in here. You know, like,
right.
I ain't no nursing home. I'm going to be right here up in the room like Uncle Pete.
And now, after COVID-19, I'm surely like, in my trust, if I get sick, move me in with a friend and let them take care of me and let me pay them.
Right.
So those are all the types of considerations that you can think of in terms of your estate plan. Is like, who's going to get all this stuff that I have? How do I want them to get it? Like, using me as an example, part of what I own is my business. It's a law firm. I can't leave a law firm to a non-lawyer. So I've got to be creative in how I, leave my plan, because I have to have a lawyer friend, which I have, that will step in to finalize my business or continue my business. But then my house, I may not want that same lawyer friend to be over my house. I might say, I want Aries to deal with this, blah, 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 blah. So it's just really having a conversation and like thinking about these things. And COVID is a perfect opportunity for all of us to really sit down and be like, okay, if something happens to me, then what? Are people going to know where to even find my instructions? A lot of people will trust, and then they don't even know where it is. I'm a part of a lot of listservs, and I see emails all the time. An attorney says, oh, I did the estate plan, or I'm representing Aries and she's looking for her father's estate plan. Did anybody work with this person? Because they don't know where it is. And clients often come to me, they're like, well, is there somewhere where these documents are like registered, or is there some national database where we can go? No.
I would think it would be, though. It seems like it should be like that.
Especially with the way technology is today.
Mm-hmm.
So yes and no, because a trust is really private. It's unlike probate, which is public. If anything happens in probate court, you could go down to the courthouse and pull those documents and be all in everybody's business. That's why when celebrities pass away, TMZ, they're able to go get that information because it's public record. But a trust is private. There's no requirement that you have to actually lodge or file a trust somewhere. That's one of the reasons why I really like it, because if I die, let it be on the record. Don't be all in my business.
Right. Seriously.
I don't want people knowing all that.
Should we share what's in our trust with the people that are in the trust? Like, let's say,
you should know, right?
If I say I'm giving everything to Kim, but I got my mom, I got all these people, and I just don't want to give them nothing. Like, should I be telling them, guess what, Kim getting everything before, or should they just find out?
I think so. And even though that's my counsel, people don't always.
They know their family. That's why
they don't always heed my instructions. Yep. There are so many people that are like, I'll just let them deal with that when I'm gone. They don't want to deal with the conflict. But the reason why it would be important to tell the people now is because guess what's going to happen with your family when you give everything to Kim? They're going to be like, Aries would have never done that.
Yeah.
No, it's no way she would have, and she did. But because you didn't tell them, they don't believe it. So now they're going to probably, file a lawsuit against Kim. Thinking
now she got to come out the pocket for no reason.
Wow.
Exactly. So if you can be honest with people about what's happening, plus you want the people who are in it to know what to expect, to know like what's going on. So let's say if you give everything to Kim and then you pass away, if she never knew that you did that, she's also not going to know to go call the trustee to be like, where is my everything? Y'all haven't given me nothing, because she didn't know what to expect. So yes, I recommend that. Sometimes it's an awkward conversation to be had, but I definitely think at least somebody should know. Your trustee is a person that's important to have a copy of the documents, because what if something happens to you and you don't know where your copy is? Give them a copy. But then again, if you change it, now it's going to be important to let that person know that you've made some changes. So some of the things that might trigger you to update your plan is, I always tell people, like, significant life events. So if you have more children, if children pass away, if at one point you were married, now you're divorced, or first you weren't married and now you are. If relationships change, if you give everything to Kim and then y'all not cool no more, you might want to make
update
changes
that
to your documents. Yeah, and you can, as long as you have the mental capacity to understand what you're doing, you can change. Some people change their stuff every other day, so you absolutely can make changes to your documents.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the next questions, and you've kind of answered that, is like, who should consider estate planning? So even if you're single with no kids, you should still have an estate plan, right?
Yes. So when I talk about estate planning, I usually talk about 4 key documents. These are documents that I think everyone should consider. And really, like, 3 of the 4, you absolutely have to have. So the first one is going to be having a will. Everybody should have a will, period. And a will is something very easy to do. Here in California, we recognize holographic wills, which means a handwritten will. So if you're like on your deathbed and you didn't get to an attorney, or you didn't get a chance to do a will, you can write it out, and you better hurry up and do it. And so, but oral wills are not, at least again here in California, are not recognized. And sometimes people don't understand that. Like, families will call me and say, everybody knew Big Mama always said that she was going to give the house to so-and-so. And I'm like, did Big Mama write that down somewhere? Because if she didn't, it's nothing that I can do with that. So make sure you have a will that says, you know, if I have this property, this is who gets it. But like we talked about already, for some people, and for a lot of people, a trust is probably a more comprehensive planning tool than a will. So you might want to have both, or either or, but usually both, depending on what your estate looks like, how much property you have. But then you also want to consider a power of attorney. A power of attorney is a document that names an agent, names a person who has legal authority to step in and handle whatever business you authorize them to handle for you while you're alive, but cannot handle that business yourself for whatever the reason is. And you get to define when their power kicks in. So you could say, you know, I'm traveling, I'm going to the Bahamas for vacation, but with COVID, I don't know if they're going to let me back in the States. So I'm going to name someone as my agent in case I can't get back when I thought I could get back, that they can still handle my business. Or I'm going to name someone as my power of attorney so that if I fall down the flight of stairs and now I have amnesia, I don't know who I am anymore, that person can still step in and handle my business, make phone calls on my behalf. Because if you've ever tried to do any business for a loved one and you call somewhere, the first thing they're going to say is, you're not authorized on this account. We can't talk to you. We don't see you listed. They're not going to give you any information. But if you say, I am this person's agent under the power of attorney, let me provide you with a copy of this document, then you now have the green light to act on their behalf. And so power of attorney is one of those things where you never know when you're going to need it. But once you need it and you don't have it, it's a problem. So you rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And then the fourth and final document, which I think is even more important now with the coronavirus, and especially for single people, is the advance directive, or depending on your state, it might be called a living will. And that's where you explain what type of end of life treatment you want, what type of medical care you want. It could also be called a power of attorney for health care. Like, what type of health related decisions is somebody authorized to make for you? And that is critical, because at any moment we might get sick. We don't know how serious it's going to be. And if the doctors, especially now that they're trying all
pulling people off the ventilators and stuff. You like, hold on, don't pull me off no ventilators, man.
Right. You need somebody to be your advocate, to speak on your behalf, to tell them what type of treatments they can and cannot do. You can't do it. You can't speak for yourself. So who's going to be there to talk for you, to say they don't want this type of lifestyle? If they go on this ventilator and it means that they're going to lose their independence, we had a conversation, they drafted this document, and they told me that this is not the type of lifestyle that they wanted. You want somebody to be able to carry that out. And for think about like young married couples too. I always think about this, because a new couple, like a new married couple, the spouse may feel like entitled to make that choice, but the parents,
they're like, get up out of here, you just got here a year ago. Hi, baby.
And you probably seen that.
Right. That happens frequently. And so you don't want that for your family. You don't want that for your spouse. You don't want that for your parents. So you want to have these decisions made so that everybody is clear on what their role is and what position to play. And so for Kim, for you might want to consider having these documents for your daughter, because if something were to happen to your daughter while she's away at college, it is possible that the university may not give you information. So you might be calling to say, my baby's in the hospital, what's going on? And they're like, she's over 18, we can't tell you. We can't give you access to her medical records. And that's like, what?
And that's when you got the crazy person in the hospital. Like, you like, we don't need these problems. We trying to.
So if you make sure you have the documents in place for yourself, but also have them in place for your daughter, that God forbid anything happened to her, she names you as her agent for health related things or for financial matters, so that if the university tries to act funny and they won't tell you something, then you can get the information that you need.
And even for our moms, like both Aries and I kind of care for our mothers to a certain extent. I'm thinking, like, does my mother have that in place?
I have it for my mom and my dad, but that's only because Lauren is my best friend and I knew that I needed to have that. So my dad, what he has right now, like he sent me, he got a will, he got his, the healthcare directive thing. Cause I'm like, at least let's get that. Cause everything else, you know, it's just going to take effort and time to get other people to do stuff. But, with my mom, you know, she doesn't have a property. So I'm like, okay, what are the things that I need? If anything were to happen, what, you know, important to me, obviously, is that healthcare thing, because I want to be able to help make decisions and stuff like that. So, yeah.
So, like with using Aries' family as an example, like her uncle that passed, before he passed, he was sick for a really long time. And her father had to handle business for him, but he had to first go to court to get permission to even do that. So that's called a conservatorship. There's always like a legal process to accomplish what we fail to do. But as with anything, when you have to rely on the court or the legal system, it's just a hassle. So first they had to go through a conservatorship. Then once the uncle passed away, then they had to go through probate. So their experience was even more extended out. So if you have a power of attorney, if you have an advanced healthcare directive, you can often avoid the requirement of a conservatorship, because that person is already empowered to step in if you lose capacity, if you're hospitalized, if you're in ICU, then you skip conservatorship. Or if your trustee can have authority to allow you to skip conservatorship. But if you don't, then somebody's going to have to go to court to get permission to carry out business for you.
And think about what this is doing for you're not able to grieve. You're not able to support your family the way that you need to, because y'all talking business this whole time. Like as soon as the person died, you're like, what we gonna do at the house? You ain't even sad. You know, can't even really get sad and go through all that in a healthy way. While you're dealing with all that. Because I honestly feel like, you know, it was like immediate. We're there. We're good. Make arrangements, funeral, all this stuff. And you can't, if it's organized, I just imagine it would have been a whole different 30 days later, we would have had everything taken care of, you know, and then we can really support each other mentally and stuff like, and emotionally and all that during the process. So I'm like, we got to have this going forward. So I'm a big advocate.
So knowing all of this, you have really educated us, Lauren. What's the first step to starting an estate plan?
So I think the first step is really to just think about what you have, jot down, get out a notepad and start writing down what you own, what things are of value, and even not even monetary items, because families will fight over personal property or like mama's quilt or the family photo albums. Now, our people don't really fight over that. Our people fight over the house and the money.
Right.
But the other folks, these folks, they be fighting over stamps and and like
collectible
coins.
They fight over like the stuff that's been in the family for years, the sentimental value. So it's still important for us to consider, think about the property that you own and who is going to get it. If you have minor children, who do you want to take care of your kids if something happens to you? Especially if you're separated from their biological parent. Now, the biological parent will have their own legal rights to take care of the children. But imagine if, God forbid, something happened to that parent. You want your voice to be articulated, even from the grave, is that if, John ain't around anymore, I want my mom to take my kids, so you want to make sure that you think about that. So the first step would be, think about this, period. Give some thought to this, is that we are not going to live forever. With COVID, they don't know nothing about this. Okay. We don't know how it's going to affect us. We don't know if they reopen the country. If we catch it, will we recover? Will we not? We just don't know. So we need to sit down and give some thought to an uncomfortable conversation. It's uncomfortable to think about dying. It's uncomfortable to think about illness, but
it's part of life.
It's part of reality.
To live is we're gonna die one day. Like that, we got to be real about that. While you were talking, I was thinking, like, if you're not with your child's other parent, and let's say they've been gone their whole life, and then they have rights to come get that child if something happened to you, like, we need to have a conversation. Let me write this down.
So you got to invite a family lawyer. That would be a good conversation to have.
Wow.
They can talk about all that. So the first step will be to think about all of this. And then the next step will be to talk with your friends who's already done the planning. Like Aries, I know you've already done the planning, and get a referral, somebody that you can work with who can help you do it. And then I would say the third step would be commit to doing it. So don't let this be something that you put off and put off and put off. And a lot of times, we have heard something about this, a little bit, but we haven't taken the time to actually commit to doing it. So I would say, think about what you have, who's important to you, how you want your property to pass, and the choices that you want to make. And then find somebody who can help you do it, and then just do it. Like, put a date on the calendar, get an accountability partner, tell somebody, by at the end of 90 days, I'm committing to having my trust and my will and my advance directive and my power of attorney complete. And will you hold me accountable? At the end of 90 days, I want to show you that I got this work done. Because it really don't even take 90 days. But
I was going to ask you, how long does it take to complete a trust? Estate planning.
Not long at all. I mean, it depends on the office that you're working with. Of course, like I've gotten a lot more estate plans since everyone's scared of the coronavirus. So it just
depends. That's increased your business,
right? I'm a solo practitioner, so I work alone. So it's just based on like my capacity to do it. But it doesn't take long at all. And I actually can do estate plans on an emergency basis. Like, I mean, I could do an estate plan in a day. I mean, as long as you know your choices. The hardest part is when the client doesn't know what they want to do. When I start to interview you and I'm like, who's important to you? Like, my mom, but then I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like, well, then that's going to take.
That's so hard. It is hard because then you're thinking, okay, if you got young kids, like for me, I think about them. I'm like, okay, so I don't want my house. I want to kind of do like what your grandma did and say, okay, y'all can't sell this house until they get a certain age where I feel like they're mature enough to make a decision that y'all might want to live here rent free for however long. You might want to rent this place out and keep that as a source of income for y'all. Like, it's so much to it. And you're like, okay, what age and when? Like, so kind of going through that is a little bit harder. But I think if you really sit down and think about it, you can come up with something at least to start with.
And don't have like analysis paralysis. You got to pick something and just know that you can change your mind. So whatever you decide today, if that's not what you want 6 months from now, you can always change it. But don't let the inability to reach a conclusive decision prevent you from doing something altogether, because something is certainly better than nothing. I change my mind all the time. If I was to look at my trust right now, I probably, in fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I definitely want to change my mind. Because I'm like single. So a lot of the players that are in my trust are friends. And relationships change. You know, people become less important to you. I know I have some attorneys listed that I would have take over my practice, and I'm like, So note to self, Lauren's got to change her estate plan. But I would say just do it sooner than later. You know, I cannot stress enough how mind-blowing this whole global pandemic has been. I was doing estate plans in March, and the plan was done, the clients were ready to sign, and then we couldn't get notaries to sign them because at the time notaries weren't considered essential workers, so they weren't able to be out. Well, now, you know, that's changed and the state has adjusted, but imagine if you were somebody that needed that at that moment. They couldn't. You know, don't wait. We can't assume that we know what's going to happen out there in the world. So while you've got the mental capacity to do it, certainly do it. If you've got elderly parents, get them to do it sooner than later.
Because if they lose capacity, you can't do it, right?
I cannot have them sign documents if I am not convinced that they understand what they're doing. So when I told you guys my first probate case, the woman couldn't sign her documents. It wasn't because she died. It was really because she lost capacity first. So she had a will. The will was about 20 years old. And so she had something in place, which was amazing, but her wishes had at that point changed. She had a whole long-term boyfriend that was important to her that she wanted to leave some property to. So, and she had her house was like worth $1 million. So her estate was certainly going to go through probate if she were to pass away. We met on a Monday, and she explained to me about her relationship with the boyfriend, that she wanted him to share in a part of her estate if she were to pass away. I had all my instructions. I went to the office that night, drafted the plan. I came back on Tuesday to go over it with her, and she had received a terminal diagnosis at that point. So she had fallen sick, but she didn't know what it was. And it was like cancer, I think. And so they gave her a terminal diagnosis on Tuesday. So when I went back to review the documents with her, she was like just real sad, obviously depressed. You know, she got this really bad health news. So I said, no worries. I'll come back the following day, which was Wednesday. So when I came back on Wednesday, she was there with her family. They were like loving on her because now the news was out that she had this terminal diagnosis. So again, I'm like, okay, no worries. If I had known, in hindsight, I would have pressed a harder line. So I said, no worries, I'll come back the next day, Thursday, and we can review it and you can sign it. And that's that. So on Thursday, when I met with her, she didn't know who I was. She didn't know who she was. When I was asking her to like tell me what we talked about on Monday. Do you remember meeting with me on Monday? What did we talk about? Who did you say you wanted to, give your house to? She was naming people who had already died.
Wow.
So she was already in a whole other plane. She was getting ready to transition. Now, legally, I could not allow her to sign. Now, if she had had a power of attorney,
they could have given you
they could have signed on her behalf if the power of attorney had authorized them that power. So here's another thing about people doing things themselves. I explained to them that if she has a power of attorney, then we can probably do this. Now, they wanted me to do the power of attorney. I'm like, I can't. I already know that the lady is a conflict of interest, and I already know that she doesn't have capacity. Now, if y'all come up with one, that ain't my business, right? But there's a lot of things online, a lot of PDFs and examples that you can take online, but without the legal counsel, you don't know what you're doing. That's the bottom line. So they were able to come up with a power of attorney document. They pulled one. It was from a different state, which was problem number one. And then problem number two is it did not authorize them to sign estate planning documents on her behalf. So it didn't work. Now, if they had worked with an attorney, I mean, it was too late at that point because the lady didn't have capacity. But if she had her documents in place early on, then, you know, the situation could have been different. So in the end, she died, and that 20-year-old will is what was admitted to probate, even though the family and myself and the boyfriend knew that she wanted something different, because I had my notes from the Monday meeting.
Right.
And I explained that to the family. I said, now, you guys aren't obligated legally to honor this, but I am telling you that I met with her and she had capacity on Monday. And this is what she said was important to her. So what do you guys want to do? And what do y'all think the family did?
No.
But the will says, I mean, we should go with
everybody gonna give 25,000. I want my 25, you know, so that's what you're leaving up to other people's judgment and all that. And we know, I mean, come on, we love our families, but we know that there's a couple characters that we might not want to have stuff that we have. So it's just a matter of like, do it quickly so that you don't have to be in this situation, because you don't know. And then with this thing, they put us on these 14-day timelines. You don't know what that's going to do. If you're on a ventilator, you can't talk, you don't know what. So better safe than sorry, basically. I feel like we can talk about this for hours, y'all.
I know. I'm like intrigued.
Because I wanted to get into some celebrity cases and all that, but we really kind of are at
our mark. Well, I'd be happy to come anytime. And if anybody has any questions or wants to talk about this or needs a referral for your specific state, feel free to reach out to me. My law firm is the Law Office of Lauren M. Peebles. My website is www.thepeebleslawyer.com. That's my last name. So don't let this be something that you hear and not act on. Hopefully whoever is listening will be pricked in their heart to take care of this for their family.
Yep, and we'll put a link for your website in the show notes so that people can go check you out and at least read some of the stuff you have up there about these documents and all that good stuff. So I'm so happy.
They can follow you on social media as well.
So glad. And another thing you guys can do is go to our website, boldblackgirls.com, and make sure you go and get your Bold Black Girl t-shirt, which I have a purple one on today, but we don't have those on the website, but still support the podcast and rate and review our episodes, this one in particular and any others that you enjoy. And please share with a friend or family member that you think should hear this message. Just click the little lines and send them a link and let them take a listen, because you probably if you're like me, I'm going to send this to my dad because I keep on talking to him about it. Like, we getting this estate plan done, especially after dealing with this. Like for us, when we went through this, now it's way more real. He like, I don't want y'all to have to go through this with me.
Exactly.
So it's definitely important. So again, thank you, Lauren, for joining.
Yes, thank you. This was so good.
It was good.
So Lauren, we usually have a call to action. So based upon all of this and what we've titled this is preparation in a pandemic. And even though it's like you're preparing for your departure, or even if you get sick, what are some things that we can do as a call to action for estate planning?
Probably those three. What was those 4 documents you said?
Those 3. You want to make sure that you either get a will and a trust, or a will or a trust, depending on what your property is. You know, your situation, it could be either or both. Your advance directive, your living will, those are the same documents, and your power of attorney. You should have those documents signed, sealed, delivered. Have those documents signed and executed, witnessed by a notary or whatever the execution rules are in your state, and put them in your file cabinet or put them somewhere where people who are named in them will know where they can be located and what their task is. You want to have these documents in place. This is a crazy time where everything is so uncertain. But COVID-19 is not the only thing that is a threat to us. There's a bunch of other things out there. So COVID is just the thing that is on everybody's mind. But the call to action is really get your documents together. Find people who you trust that you can name to help you or help your family if something should happen, and get these documents signed sooner than later.
Amen. And that is the benediction, everybody. So we will see y'all next week, and talk to you later.
Week.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.